What if an appliance emergency didn't have to be? If your appliances suddenly decided they were done, don't stress. Best Buy has you covered with a wide variety of major appliances from trusted brands, in stock and available now. So you don't have to worry about laundry piling up, refilling the fridge, or that big dinner party you're hosting. Because Best Buy has the knowledge and expertise to get you the right appliance for your home. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
Trump will be visiting the royal family, including King Charles. I cannot wait to see those two together. So, Charles, let me get this part straight. You cheated on your ex-wife with an older woman? Is that even legal? Is that like driving on the wrong side of the road? While Trump is over there, he'll be treated to an opulent banquet in Windsor Castle and a carriage ride through the grounds of Windsor Castle. Oh, the pageantry! He's just like Cinderella, but good luck slipping the glass slipper on those cankles. Now...
Welcome to Quiet Riot, a politics podcast that is more drag than flag. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. We're here to offer levity, reason and courage, arming you with actions to take so the world can be a little more hope and a little less hate.
So take a beat, count to 10, and help us begin another Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
After a weekend which saw a large demonstration on the streets of London by Unite the Kingdom, led by Stephen Yaxley-Lennon and fueled by Elon Musk, we discuss how to defeat the far right and a brand new book entitled Just That.
And of course, dear friend of the late convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and President of the USA, Donald Trump, is in town for his second state visit to the UK. We'll talk about what the UK hopes it will achieve and whether or not that's likely.
To help us, it's author of the book, How to Defeat the Far Right, CEO of the leading anti-racism, anti-fascism organisation in the UK, Hope Not Hate. It's Nick Lowles. Welcome, Nick.
Hello. First of all, apologies because I'm sitting in a hotel foyer, so there might be a bit of background noise.
That's all right. We understand. Your book only came out yesterday, I think was the official launch. So you've been very, very busy. It was actually by coincidence that we had your book today, not anticipating the Yaxley-Lennon protest last weekend or anything like that. So we were keen to get your insights, even though your schedule is compressed. So thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure to be here.
Nick, it's not often we have people on the show who have had entire TV programmes made about them. The Lockstock actor Jason Fleming was cast to play you in the ITV drama The Walk-In. I assume because Jamie Dornan wasn't available. But I wanted to ask you, how does it feel to watch someone being you? And how did you help him prepare for being Nick Lowles?
To be fair, I didn't prepare him at all. I only met him once mid-filming, where he came up to me and claimed to have surprised that I didn't have a beard. He thought I had a beard and he had grown one for the program. I'm not sure I really believe that because I have never had a beard and I've never been photographed with even a false beard. But it was strange to see someone to play me. It was strange that it was a drama adaptation of a true story. They obviously compressed a lot of information into a few hours of TV. So sometimes the chronology wasn't quite accurate in terms of real events. Sometimes some of the best lines were actually given to Stephen Graham, which were actually said by me. But you know, that's inside the secret. But look, I mean, you know, it's as you say, it was a very serious issue of a plot to kill a Labour MP, that we stopped and we're really proud of. But also, I think the series, which has recently been on Netflix, brought the kind of extremism and violence of Britain's far right to the screens of billions of people.
Quiet Riot. Last weekend, many Londoners bunkered down and stayed home, but especially those from minority communities, those who are the main target of the fascists who organised an enormous march and rally through the streets of our capital after a summer of hotel protests, flag flying, and increased anti-immigrant rhetoric. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, better known by his pseudonym Tommy Robinson, was the chief architect, but his message to the 100,000 plus crowd was amplified by the world's richest man, Elon Musk, and a parade of far-right global figures.
You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. You either fight back or you die. And that's the truth.
Today, Elon, I think the British public are telling the world that they're ready to fight back.
Good. Yes.
Come on, Great Britain.
Oh!
It feels bleak, and it is bleak. But Nick Lowles has written us all a manual, How to Defeat the Far Right, drawing on his decades-long experience of writing about, organising against, infiltrating and successfully beating the far right and British Nazis. He believes that when given the choice between hope and hate, most people will choose hope. So how do we offer them that? Nick, spurred on by your horror as a little boy, a 10-year-old boy, when you were worried the National Front might win and send your mum back to Mauritius, as they were claiming they wanted to do, send all the migrants home, you essentially dedicated your life to fighting racism, xenophobia, fascism. So I want to begin by asking you, how bad are things right now, mid to late 2025, in the historical terms of your career watching all of this?
I mean, I think we've got to be brutally honest. I think that we are facing the biggest threat, certainly of my adult life. And I think that things that we took for granted in terms of, Britain's multicultural society, in terms of everyday racism that was probably quite prevalent in the 70s and early 80s, is now back. Not only are people being really scared, the far right are obviously not only growing, but increasingly confident, increasingly aggressive. But, unless we do something now, it's going to get worse. And I think we only have to look across the Atlantic to the US to see what could happen if the far right gain power.
And how much of that is driven by what you call in your book the direct correlation between economic deprivation and hating immigrants?
I mean, I think it's undeniably a fact. And we, in the book, I go through a lot of data where we've been able to analyze attitudes to immigration down to output area level now. That's 160 houses. Look at the output area levels with the highest level of anti-immigrant sentiment, overlay it with levels of multiple deprivation, and there is a clear correlation. Conversely, the areas with the least anti-immigrant sentiment are areas with very, very low levels of deprivation. So, first of all, there is a clear link between economic deprivation and economic pessimism. But of course, it's not just that, because obviously those communities that suffer most from economic decline have also seen the decline in social capital, i.e. the bonds within communities that have kept communities together. So again, direct correlation that those same communities are being most hit by austerity. So there are many factors, but ultimately we're not going to be able to address or reduce people's anger around immigration without also addressing the economic pessimism that is often driving it.
So, Nick, social capital, are we talking about the death of the high street, the cracked window panes in boarded up shops? Are we talking about pub closures? Like, what do we mean when we talk about the fabric of a community eroding?
All of those and more. So it is the high street. It is the venues that people would gather. It is the working men's club, the pub, the cinema that's gone. It is the playing fields. I mean, 10,500 playing fields got sold off under the Tories. There's very little common space, and particularly free common space anymore. The closure of youth clubs. And I mean, look, that's partly to do with cuts and political decisions. It's also to do with changing behavior because of the internet. People mix less than they did previously, but it's also the changing workplace. In the 1970s, you had large workplaces. Now, one of the benefits was that people from different backgrounds would often interact. There's far less interacting now with people of different backgrounds in the workplace or in the community. We're just doing some research now. And again, we're finding a direct correlation those people who are not involved in community activity, whether that's sports clubs, whether that's community groups, voluntary groups, churches, are more likely, A, to be isolated, but also to be more fearful of the newcomer or the outsider.
A third of the top 50 areas with the most negative attitudes towards migrants are in Clacton, where Nigel Farage is the MP, of course, but where there is a tiny, tiny percentage of a Muslim population. And there used to be, I've seen 2 studies in the past, that the areas with the most negative attitudes towards immigration actually have quite low immigration. Does that inverse relationship also still hold, broadly speaking?
Yes, it does. And I mean, in terms of Clacton, it's the negative attitudes towards Muslims rather than immigrants per se. But yes, I mean, you tend to find that in places where people mix and people interact each day, particularly where people are facing the same stresses in life, they find they're more likely to interact, find common bonds, and see beyond people's race or religion. And again, the very fact that it is the communities that probably have the lowest levels of immigration, but the highest levels of deprivation, does, again, to me, demonstrate that you're not going to address concerns of immigration and everything without addressing the underlying economic pessimism that actually leads to this. What I would say is that many people on the right will say, oh, look, it's liberal areas. Liberal areas are all, lovey-doveys. Why don't they experience about things? What we find even in kind of deprived working class communities in the cities, in towns, where people share the same characteristics, they're less likely to be hostile because they recognize that they're in the same boat together. That isn't to say that there's an anti-immigrant sentiment or whatever, but the intensity is it's the fear of the unknown or the fear of change.
Yeah. I also saw a recent report on Sky News. It was a sort of typical seaside community that used to get a lot of tourism, has a lot of hotels and hospitality there. And they were saying that since Brexit, basically because they can no longer get the sort of hospitality staff that they used to get from other EU countries, they've had to recruit quite a lot of people, primarily of Southeast Asian descent. And I wonder how much there is also a factor of, in a way, immigrants becoming more visible to local communities. Communities are becoming more aware of the levels of immigration without necessarily immigration having gone up in absolute terms in those communities. Is that a factor?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's just one of the kind of ironies of Brexit. Those who felt that they were voting for Brexit to bring down immigration numbers, in fact, actually, because of the pressures on the economy and who can come in, who can't, we saw a big increase in non-white, non-European immigration. The coastal areas have been particularly impacted. And again, it's not just that the change in the kind of visual composition of a community, it's coinciding with a decline in the economy in that local area as well. So it's a collision of these two things together that have been exploited and have been fueled by the far right to scapegoat.
And of course, the negative impact of Brexit on the economy, making it this kind of perfect storm and circular thing. Now, Nick, I wanted to talk about the nature of the work that Hope Not Hate does. And it often means that you guys are in receipt of better intelligence about violent fascists organising than the police are. You have helped put some very nasty, violent people behind bars, as you mentioned, helping to uncover the plot of the murder of an MP, to stalking, intimidation. So my question is, why aren't the police and security services not doing that work themselves? Why does it fall to Hope Not Hate?
I think there's probably a number of factors here. I think, one is resources. The police have had massive cuts like every other public service, and they are stretched, particularly kind of smaller police forces that have got rid of intelligence officers, that have got rid of some of the community liaison officers, etc. But I think it's broader than that. It's a mindset thing as well, both in the sense of how the police and how the security services understand threat. Now, to us, a lot of anti-Muslim hatred is a serious threat. The language that is used around Muslims and some of the narrative, some of it quite mainstream, is not seen as an issue by the security services, even the Home Office or the government. Sort of the language and propaganda evades police inspection, evades police monitoring, because it's seen as against a faith and not a race. Two other factors. One is that historically, the authorities have seen the threat primarily coming from the kind of Islamist or jihadist wing. And secondly, there has been a reluctance on the part of the police in many years to understand cause and effect. But the propaganda pushed out by individuals and groups causes a reaction, and it winds people up, and it leads to people carrying out awful attacks. Often what's happened in the past, the assessment has been done on the person saying something or doing something or writing something. More often than not, those people will not be thinking or willing to carry something out, and that's the end of the matter, rather than the fact that how does that propaganda inspire others. The final thing I'd say, the final thing I'd say is that the nature of the far right has changed dramatically in the last few years. Now, we call it the post-organizational far right. So it's less about organizations anymore. It's less about kind of organized structures. The far right is far more fluid. It's often around individuals on social media, but also the use of kind of encrypted messaging boards, things like Telegram. People flit in and out, and they're much more fluid often, and it's transnational, it's international. Sometimes the people are winding stuff up from abroad or whatever, and the police are either unwilling or unable to kind of track some of this, or simply don't know. And what I would say, we're a very small group of people, but between us we have many decades of experience, and often it's simply through the hard work of a very few people, we have a knowledge or understanding or even a kind of gut feeling about things, which often the police don't have.
You've been working in this field since the 90s, and you've touched on this in terms of like the individual riling up people, the impact of a YouTuber, a TikToker, or whatever from many different places around the world. So I wanted to ask you about the speed of radicalization of often young people, not always, but how quickly do people get radicalized now in our era of social media compared to the early 90s when you began doing all this work?
Well, it is quite incredible. I opened the book by telling the story of a young man who I call Lee. Lee isn't his real name, who basically got radicalized in a 2-month period from the kind of death of George Floyd. While most of his school friends, and particularly girls at his school, he was 15 years old at the time, while most of them gravitated to Black Lives Matter and the campaign for kind of racial equality and equity, he reacted to it and he went in another direction. Within 2 months of that, and this was during COVID, so he was spending a lot more time on the internet and delving into kind of dark corners of 4chan, etc. Within 2 months, he had joined a group online that was plotting terrorist offences. I've heard stories about people being radicalized even quicker than that. So I think that, obviously the role of the internet, the role of social media. But what I'd also say, it's more than just that. Part of my book is a challenge to ourselves. How do we think? How do we talk? How do we engage with people? Because what this young man told me, he's now 19, and it was actually us, because we had infiltrated this group. It was us who got him arrested. But one of the things that he said to me, and I think, this is a moment of pause for me, he said, look, being involved in the far right was fun. It was empowering. The whole language was about making themselves better. He saw the left as lecturing, telling people what to think, saying you're not allowed to think this or you're not allowed to think that. The right use mocking, they use humiliation, they use abuse in a way that gives power, wrongly, but gives power to young men. And I think there are many challenges to us that I think that, we can blame government, we can blame this, we blame that, but also we need to reflect on our own behavior. And one of the core messages in my book is that we have to earn the right to be heard. Our righteousness in our views isn't enough.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Nick, a thought that occurred to me the other day, and it might be completely wrong, but there seems to me to be a link between a certain type of young male that has a sort of aggressive excess energy to expend. And this used to be expressed on the football stands. And I was thinking that maybe we should have educated racism out of football instead of kicking racism out of football. There's a sense that we just kicked it out into the high street. And what do you think of that?
I think to a certain extent, there are some young men who do not see the consequences of their action. They get thrills or kicks out of violence or being in a gang, or they feel powerful. And I don't think that's changed for 150 years. What I would say also, I mean, for example, let's say with football violence, something that I studied a lot, and in a way, a lot of my peers when I was growing up was involved in it was in the 1980s. But in a way, it's a reflection of society as well. Sometimes in looking for solutions, we end up looking for kind of top-down solutions. We create new laws. We tell people, about their behavior, you should do this or shouldn't do that. I really think, particularly now, because of, lack of trust in authority, lack of trust in the government, lack of trust in the police or whatever, and not having those pillars that was often quite useful to engage young people like youth clubs, youth workers. We need to do more of peer-to-peer stuff. We can't legislate against youth radicalization because actually, yes, we can lock some people up, but actually you are pushing more people to rebel against the system. So, for example, on young people in the book, I say, there needs to be something between school and prevent. A kid gets into trouble or a kid does something bad at school, and at the moment now you get referred to prevent. Now you go into the system and it becomes hard to kind of lose that tag, but it does nothing to actually help the young person themselves. And I think that, we've got to find a way that we work with young people, but also we use young people to kind of engage with other young people. We can't just have a parent solution or a school solution or a police solution. We've got to have young people engaging with other young people and trying to offer a different path to them.
Yeah, I mean, this is really sort of getting my juices excited, because we've got to try and make progressive values a good laugh. We've got to find a way to make it fun, and that is actually a huge challenge for those of us who tend to take everything far too seriously and have pretty strident moral values. So let's get on to the hope element of the book and what can be done, because it feels like the fash is this kind of growing groundswell of mainstream thought, but in reality, they are still an increasingly noisy minority, while we remain an increasingly silent majority. There are, I hope, more of us than them. So, Nick, what do we need to know? What's going to work? Like, what would you hope listeners could take away as 3 things maybe that they could do to start turning the tide on all of this? Because it's obvious what we can expect politicians to do in changing their rhetoric and all of that. But for people like us who want to get out there and get into communities and start making a difference, what would you ask them to do with the information in your book?
Yeah, I mean, this is a $6 million question. I think, first of all, I'd say is that we all have a role to play. And as you say, absolutely correctly, we are the majority. The British public overall is in a much better position on immigration, on cohesion, on community, on togetherness than the social media or even the kind of political narrative suggests. But we are silent, we're less confident, we're certainly less angry and less vocal than the other side. So the first thing I'd say is that there is a role for us all to play. And by playing a role, that means, onto my second point, I think that we need to better articulate what we're for, not just what we're against. When people are given a choice between hope and hate, people will primarily choose hope. And I think that there is a danger that we kind of, in a way, we're allowing the other side to set the narrative, and all we're doing is being against that. Well, actually, what we've got to do is, what type of society do we want to live in? What type of values do we want to live by? and how do we want to treat one another. So I think you've got to be much better at vocalizing what we're defending and what we're promoting. I think the third thing as well is that we've got to think local. I think that there is a big disconnect with how people see their local community to how they see national problems. We see that with crime, we see that with immigration, we see that with cohesion. The vast majority of people think their local community is peaceful, is safe, people get along together. They think there are national problems. But also within those communities, within communities up and down the country, there are amazing people doing amazing things. We got to support those people.
Yeah.
They are trusted people who are helping people day in, day out. We've got to support them. We've got to amplify them. We've got to do more to build them. Because also the data shows quite clearly the more people are involved in their community, whether that's through sport, whether that's through faith, whether that's through voluntary charity work, the better they feel about their community, and they're more likely to be more welcoming to their neighbour. So, get involved locally, speak out, and be vocal in terms of what we're for rather than just what we're against.
Well, I think that, Nick, is a perfect place for us to give our listeners the regular call to action. Of course, this week, that is to go and buy Nick's brilliant book, How to Defeat the Far Right, Lessons from Hope Not Hate, published on the 25th of September by HarperCollins. You can find links in the show notes and on our bookshop. Read it, absorb it, let it be your manual for winning so that hate doesn't triumph. And make sure to support the work of Nick's team at Hope Not Hate too. But we have another call to action, which is this. If you are not white and you're listening to this and you're feeling afraid, please know that we are here, ready to defend you. And if you are white, like me, please reach out to friends, colleagues, family members and neighbours who might now be feeling petrified to stay in the place that they call home. Let them know that these bigots do not represent you, that you are proud of the diversity of our country, and that, put simply, hate has no home here. And bloody well tell Keir Starmer while you're at it. Quiet, riot. And now, in what I can only imagine is a week fit to burst with examples of flagrant media snowflakery, it is, of course, time for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Alex, don't tell me that Snog, Marry, Avoid is now woke.
Listen, I want no part of that conversation at all.
I bet someone has played Naomi Alex Kenny.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Listeners, do not write in with your answers.
Yeah, do not write. There is no right way to answer this that won't offend one or all of us. I know people will choose to marry me, and that will upset me because I'll be being valued for my personality over my sex. I would rather be killed. Right, on to matters at hand. Look, Naomi, we knew that the woke brigade would eventually come for our beautiful flags, didn't we?
We did.
We did. One council has issued a mealy-mouthed apology for having to take down the beautiful displays that have gone up. They said, and I quote, "We have noted a recent increase in the display of flags on street lighting columns across the country. While we understand and respect the community's desire to express national pride, it is important to ensure such expressions do not compromise public safety." They say they are taking a risk-based approach, which sounds to me like health and safety gone mad, and will, I quote, "remove flags and decorations where they pose a danger, obstruct visibility, or are poorly secured or loose."
You use super glue, damn it.
They give the example of a risk assessment where the rope involved was so strong that had a high-sided vehicle driven into it, the poles it was attached to would have been pulled down. They went on to and I quote, highlight the significant safety risks involved in the use of ladders against lighting columns, which imposes loads beyond their designed capacity. And I thought, Naomi, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is a one-off. So I checked their social media, and their last 3 posts are, first of all, are you having a clear out this weekend? Don't forget to check our website for opening times of your local household waste recycling centre.
Ooh.
Second, the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for wind, which we know is woke. We established that last year. That
If it's not red, it's woke.
Weather warnings are woke.
Yeah.
And the third one is a networking cycle forum, part of their Cycle September.
Come on. That's like an environmentally friendly, healthy way to travel. That's extremely woke.
The council in question, Durham County Council, reform-run Durham County Council, where the deputy leader is none other than Councillor Craftywank himself. So this week, Darren Grimes is woke. Thank you.
Oh, you are good. You are good. That is super. That might be inching its way up to the top of the leaderboard in terms of my favorite Wokey Dokeys. Thank you very much, listeners. We are inundated with your examples of flagrant wokery.
Oh, there's been some cracking ones.
They really have. And
we might have to do like we did a Grin and share it, because I'm saving them all. And we might have to do a back catalogue at one point where we do just a Wokey Dokey special.
Oh, we could do it the best of 2025, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could.
An end of year wrap up. But yeah, keep them coming through to us at quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Quiet Riot.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. We could all use more time. Amazon Business offers smart business buying solutions, so you can spend more time growing your business and less time doing the admin. I can see why they call it smart. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com.
Quiet Riot.
Meanwhile, over in Berkshire, the Make-A-Wish Foundation has organized a whole day of horse-drawn carriage rides for a 79-year-old dying of max factor poisoning and moose abuse.
You're proud of yourself, aren't you?
That's right. Donald Trump is on his second state visit. The UK government hopes to finalize deals on technology, nuclear power and trade. The US government hopes he doesn't poop himself and try to grab Queen Camilla's tit. Oh, and of course, the subject of free speech is bound to come up. I'm sure Trump will be furious, outraged that Led by Donkeys activists have been arrested, merely for unfurling a huge banner photo of him with his sex trafficker pedophile buddy Epstein. Or maybe not. Republicans do seem to be cooling on the whole notion of free speech, I have noticed. Maybe a lot of them skipped the First Amendment to get to their favorite. The president did, after all, just threaten Australia with trade sanctions because an Aussie journalist asked him a difficult question.
Appropriate President Trump that a president in office should be engaged in so much business activity.
Well, I'm really not. My kids are running the business. I'm here. You know what the activity, where are you from?
I'm from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Four Corners Program.
Well, the Australians, you're hurting Australia, right? In my opinion, you are hurting Australia very much right now. Your leader is coming over to see me very soon. I'm going to tell him about you. You set a very bad tone.
Before designating all difficult questions hate speech.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
You should probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart.
So the question looms, should we be rolling out the red carpet for the man who put the dick back in dictator? Nick, it is a difficult balance, isn't it? A state visit legitimizes this authoritarian bully, but we also know that the far right feeds on economic scarcity, as we discussed in the first segment. So if the visit saves a few thousand jobs and protects some tax revenue to go into public spending, where do we put that balance?
I think given what's happening across the world, given the rise of hate, I think it's incumbent on our government to be robust and speak out for its values. I think that I understand that, there are jobs and there's economic stuff and there's concerns about tariffs or whatever, but actually the stakes are so big, we have to use that relationship with the US and we have to stand on our values, and we need to call out wrong when we see it. And there is a lot of wrong going on in the world, and there's a lot of wrong that's emanating from the US. And I think that, there is a real danger of us sleepwalking into what is happening in the US, which is the emergence of authoritarianism, police crackdowns in the name of free speech. And we need to be vocal in speaking out against that, but also our priority has to be to stop that happening here.
Do you have thoughts on that, Naomi?
I think, Alex, that it is an incredibly cruel thing to have asked somebody who is having their own battle with cancer at the moment, who has just buried a close member of the royal family a day previously, a princess who is also suffering from cancer, to have to do this. They all looked utterly miserable. They all looked completely bored. Trump looks bored. Melania, well, from what little of her face we can see behind the brim of her enormous hat, clearly bored out of her brain.
I mean, Melania looks like a bored bedside lamp.
At the best of times, and particularly today. And I half wondered if Camilla was going to do a Michelle Obama and not turn up, because she was unwell herself yesterday and had to skip the Duchess of Kent's funeral at Westminster Cathedral. She didn't make it to that. And I thought yesterday, does that mean she's going to bail on Trump? Is she trying to get out of it by, feigning a cold? But no, she was there. But of course, all of them, so hugely reluctantly. And all for what? To appease a man who has criticised the democracy of the UK, who has tried to humiliate our Prime Minister, certainly our Mayor of London, who allied with people like Elon Musk, who have sought to undermine the fabric of our democracy just days before being patched in to address that crowd, calling on the King to prorogue Parliament and call another general election here in the UK. It is grotesque that we entertained him once, let alone twice. And I think because I don't believe it really works. We haven't got a much better trading deal than the EU has. In fact, on many different component parts and product lines, the EU has got lower tariffs than we do. So I don't think he is even going to reward us for all of this pomp and ceremony, which none of them seems to be enjoying anyway.
I'm not sure. As you know, I'm a little more ambivalent about this. I just think it's distraction. It's basically just shiny things to keep him from doing something worse. And the more you rope him into feeling connected to his Europeanness, the less likely I think he is to do even worse stuff. We are trying to basically hang on in the backseat of a car being driven at speed by a maniac, and jumping out or antagonizing him may not be the best option. The best option might be to put some music on and keep him engaged in conversation until the car slows down enough for us to get out of it. I do not envy the choice of any politician big enough to be on his radar right now. I really don't. It's a horrible, horrible situation, especially carrying the weight of the fate of Ukraine on your shoulders as well, because we kind of know how he will react if he suddenly becomes displeased and decides to throw his toys out of the pram. It's Ukraine that's going to pay for it. And I just don't know. I don't know.
My Brussels tentacles are tingling, and I'm told that the mandates around the defence and security agreement between the UK and the EU are being progressed at speed. And the UK may yet get access to that safe fund of 150 billion euros sooner than we had previously worried it might be. So that is all moving in the right direction. And
I did say last week, didn't I, that I'd watched some obscure committee and the two ministers on it sounded more positive than I've heard ministers sound about it in a long time.
Yeah.
We are also hearing that our friends led by donkeys have been arrested for that sort of visual protest of the massive photo of Trump with Epstein.
Yeah.
I mean, on what basis are they arrested?
We're being told that it is under the malicious communications accusation, according to the police. So that's the grounds for their arrest at the moment. So, yeah, it was this huge projection of Epstein and Trump together on the side of Windsor Castle. There has also been a van, a different campaign, one of these vans that you see that go around that have got huge screens on either side that can project the video, and then they usually drive it round and round somewhere like Parliament Square. It was being driven around Windsor with the same kind of imagery on it. The police have seized that van and taken it away. And all sorts of different words being used by the police statement about people being arrested on suspicious of malicious communication, unauthorized projection, which they call as a public stunt. Well, yes, it was a stunt, and stunts aren't illegal. And this is, as you mentioned at the top, exactly an attack on free speech. And it is not what the right mean when they say that we've got to protect free speech. They want to be protected from free speech that criticizes them while being free to talk about whatever they want on their terms. I think it's dreadfully draconian. You know, when we look at the history of Led by Donkeys since the post-Brexit era, they've probably done 30 massive projections over that time. Often the police come along and laugh and go, all right, lads, you've had your fun, you've got your photo, take it down. And these projections are done in seconds. Usually it's all about getting them the shot, right? So you unfurl the banner, you do the drop from the side of the bridge, you put the projection up onto Big Ben, or in this case, Windsor Castle, you have your team there ready to take photos, grab it, and then that goes out on social media, and that's what gets shared, and that's where the humiliation should come in. So the damage is done, the image is out there. I'm really concerned about the direction that the country is going in if we are really losing our ability to protest.
Like, the only basis I can think of is that they're suggesting that this was intended to cause distress or alarm to the president.
What about the victims? What about the distress and alarm?
Well, precisely.
The survivors of his abuse and those who have not survived
should be distressed.
Exactly. You know, who are the victims of an actual crime. This is a felon. He is convicted. Jeffrey Epstein was his very good friend and was a convicted paedophile. These are all facts that are being stated. And if we can no longer talk about facts, display facts, project facts, then you've really got to start questioning the extent to which we even have the freedom to protest in this country anymore.
Yeah.
And it has a chilling effect. You know, we talked about this on the show when we were talking about the older people getting arrested for having, you know, the Palestine Action placards in Parliament Square, and how many of us who do need to travel, who do need to earn money, who do have to think about their future careers, just simply can no longer take that risk anymore. And retired people who maybe think that their traveling days are behind them, they certainly don't need to go out and earn a crust because they've got their pensions, are prepared to take one for the team and go out and do it for us, because the chilling effect on the rest of us is too great. And it's one thing to have a placard with the name of a prescribed terrorist organization on it that the Home Office has very clearly communicated would be, a breach of terrorism law, but to tell us that we can't hold placards and unfurl banners and do projections, that is new level.
I also wanted to ask about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It seems to have created a sort of perfect martyr for that MAGA movement. How important are such figures to authoritarian tendencies? Like, instinctively, you've been doing this a long time. How much of a, excuse the pun, how much of a turning point will this murder be, you think?
I mean, I think massively. You know, Charlie Kirk was clearly a well-known and well-loved figure in the MAGA movement and from their supporters internationally. What is really clear is how the MAGA movement are using this horrific murder to push forward their authoritarianism, their crackdown on dissent, and in the name of free speech to silence their opponents. And I think that if we look at Trump 2.0, the newer Trump administration compared to the first one, they've learned their lessons from the first time. and they are going after their opponents. Some of that's going through court, some of that's going through executive action, some of that is going through the MAGA movement, harassing and targeting and, threatening people. They're using Charlie Kirk's murder to do just that. And I bring it back to the UK again. If we do not want that to happen over here, we need to start getting organized, because if we don't, that will happen over here.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
Alex, you weren't with Kenny and I on Sunday when we talked about the assassination of Charlie Kirk in the pretty immediate aftermath. So I'd love to get your take, and also with the benefit of it being the best part of a week now since that happened.
The thing is, people's lives are not linear, right? They're complicated. And so we're seeing what I expected we were going to see, that there's elements to the killer's life that basically fit both narratives, if you want, that can suggest that he was a good Republican boy that was perverted by lefty woke ideology, or the other way around, which seems much more likely to me, that he was a groyper.
Explain what a groyper is for listeners that don't know.
So a groyper is a particular faction of MAGA that is faithful to a man called Nick Fuentes, who basically thinks Charlie Kirk is far too moderate and is much more to the right, and also helped with Laura Loomer's campaign when she tried to get elected somewhere in Florida, I think. And so he's aligned with that section of MAGA. And it's interesting that Laura Loomer had posted a few days before the assassination, flaming Charlie Kirk for being basically a traitor to the MAGA cause, a post which she took down after he was killed. So it could be someone extreme from one side, it could be someone extreme from the other side. And unfortunately, the people in possession of the facts and spinning the narrative at the moment have a very clear agenda to make it one rather than the other. So I really don't know whether we will ever find out what the actual truth was. The alleged killer, of course, has been uncooperative with police. So maybe they will talk at their trial and we will find out directly from the horse's mouth what the motivation was. But everyone is trying to hijack that. I found the hagiography of Charlie Kirk being spun actually quite revolting.
Mm-hmm.
I condemn the murder completely. I condemn all violence. I'm not a violent person. Nobody deserves to be shot for their views. So that is the starting point for anything. But I'm not going to pretend to mourn the loss of that particular voice from the landscape. And I don't think those two things are contradictory, because I sense a dishonesty in it. There's a real dishonesty in it. There are plenty of things to be sad about when it comes to Charlie Kirk's assassination. The fact that a human life was lost, the fact that to his kids, he was just daddy. The fact that this will escalate the violence, the fact that his murder will be, as we can see, weaponized for all kinds of agendas, all those things.
It was all over the Tommy Robinson march.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of placards about Kirk that I saw were extreme. And it was the chatter on all of the TikTok lives that the far right were doing from the event, and people were being interviewed about Charlie Kirk, and everyone was mourning his loss because they feel that he articulated so much of what they've been brainwashed into believing. The effects are felt here. Nick is right. This is coming fast to the UK, and it is incumbent upon people like you and us to call out dishonesty where we see it, to condemn murder while also condemning his words and actions.
And it's also become a weird new sort of threshold. I posted a video of a young man that was being basically chased around by a group of thugs, having pedo shouted at him and being smacked with sandwich boards. not sandwich boards, placards, I mean. 99% of the replies from the letters, numbers, blue tick brigade were, well, at least no one shot him. Is that now the new line of what's acceptable? Like anything short of being shot is not really violent or not really reprehensible. And that really, really worries me.
Quiet Riot.
J.D. Vance took over the Charlie Kirk show as host this week. Let's have a little listen.
And while our side of the aisle certainly has its crazies, it is a statistical fact that most of the lunatics in American politics today are proud members of the far left.
Is this true, Nick? Is the far left where most extremism sort of emanates from? It seems peculiar that the day before this broadcast, the Pentagon scrubbed a huge piece of research from their site that shows the exact opposite. But I have an open mind. You know the figures better than me.
I think that claim is nonsense. It's nonsense in the US. It's certainly nonsense in the UK. Violent extremism primarily emanates from the far right. In the US, you've had the militia movements, you've had the Oath Keepers, you've had the Proud Boys, you've had all sorts of military gangs. In the UK, you've had a plethora of Nazi terrorists being arrested and sometimes carrying out horrific acts of violence. We have not seen that on the left at all. There's been the odd isolated incident, but nothing. And I think, it is quite clear that people are trying to use the awful murder of Charlie Kirk to demonize, to legislate against and prescribe groups that are speaking out against it.
Is there not a danger that disillusioned young people on the left will see that these tactics sort of arguably work, and we will begin to see a rise in radicalization on our fringes? If you label them like that, does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
There is that risk, but a lot of this comes from tradition. So, for example, until 25 years ago, there was not a tradition of Nazi terrorism in England, Wales, and Scotland. There was also a history of loyalist and Republican terrorism in Northern Ireland, but there wasn't that history over here. And so most acts of violence were street-based. It was with fists, it was with boots. Things have changed. What I'd say is that on the left, on the progressive side, primarily political action is taken through mobilization, through civil disobedience, sometimes with kind of, attacks on property or building or, graffiti or whatever. But there is not a tradition in the UK of left-wing terrorism, like proper terrorism in this country. That's not to say it won't happen, but primarily if young people get radicalized, young people get organized on the left of politics, it is more likely into mass movements or smaller groups into civil disobedience.
Yeah, I just worry that there are young people at home looking at almost 900 arrests at a rally protesting the genocide in Gaza, and then a handful of arrests at a far-right protest that turned quite violent in the end, and they think the reason the police can arrest 900 of us is because we let them, because we will allow them to peacefully and easily arrest us, put us in a van, and then release us. While if we were throwing bottles and trash cans, the police actually would take a lot fewer of us in. Do you see what I mean?
Sure. And look, I understand what you're saying. I think it's unlikely, certainly in the short term, because I think young people are quite creative. Young people are quite good at doing things that haven't reached the terrorism level. But what I would say, the onus is often on us. We need to provide the outlets and avenues for people to show their opposition to hate, to show their opposition to issues, whether it's climate or Palestine or whatever, in creative, constructive ways. Often it's the lack of those outlets which mean that people look to other things. Yes, police action is one part, but we have to provide, or we have to support and facilitate constructive ways for people to show their opposition to something.
Quiet Riot.
It's a time when we need to keep hold of objective facts, and objective facts are hard to come by, and I want you to listen to this from Trump.
Just one more on Venezuela. The president of Venezuela called the strike on the boat illegal. Are you concerned that Maduro might escalate something?
No, what's illegal are the drugs that were on the boat and the drugs that are being sent into our country. And the fact that 300 million people died last year from drugs, that's what's illegal.
I mean, the president of the United States thinks 300 million Americans died last year of a drug overdose in a country with a population of 340 million. and I'm sure that people are now circulating that. It's really, really hard because it feels like things that would not have been disputed in the past. Everything is up for grabs now. Did you see the stuff I posted about some of the far-right people arguing with Grok? Because I posted something about how the police weren't really overwhelmed by the numbers. They were overwhelmed by the aggression that was present in those numbers. And people went, oh, you're mad. And it was 3 million there. And there's never been a big march for Palestine. And there's never been a big march for... And someone asked Grok. And they had like a 20-post interaction with Grok. What Grok was saying, no, those numbers would not fit in that area. The density of people would have to be something like 5 people per square foot.
There's a great tool. I'll share it in the show notes where you can plot a route and it will tell you what the maximum capacity of people could be on it. And it's basically what the police use to try and estimate numbers. To my sort of loosely professional lens, having organised marches, it felt definitely more than the 100,000 Met figure, but probably not more than 150.
Which was the estimate, basically. It was between 110 and 150. Yeah. And the other thing is that actually that kind of estimating method can be very accurate when the entire march crosses a bridge, because that is a really set area. And if you see the crowd density and measure the time it takes them to get across, it gives you really quite an accurate estimate. I think a lot of people joined from different directions. When the football finished, there were a lot of London derbies and London matches going on that day. So I fully accept that the first estimate of 110 was on the low side. And it makes perfect sense to me that it then swelled to about 150,000 because there were people joining from other tube stations. Yeah. But it wasn't 3 million. I mean, 3 million would be from St. Paul's to
Earl's Court.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to ask you about, because you mentioned the football and you live quite near the Den where Millwall play. On the day of the march, they were actually playing down at the Valley, Charlton's ground, so a real derby for them. And the combination of that and the protest led you to put pen to paper in an incredibly powerful Substack that's been published on the Best of Written website. We'll leave a link in the show notes. But can I just ask you a bit about the motivation for writing that and how you're feeling now?
Look, it's complicated. It's complicated for someone like me that is an activist, because there is a part of me that also feels a coward for hiding, right? I feel like I'm betraying myself by looking after myself and deciding not to go out into that crowd. But, I've been in many situations, and a lot of them recently and a lot of them since Brexit, where there's been just this burst of aggression that comes out of nowhere. I mean, I was in a local Chinese takeaway not long ago, where a very, very drunk Irish man decided to confront me about being sick, as in S-I-K-H. I was trying to explain that I'm Greek. He wasn't having any of it. He was absolutely sure that I was sick, and then proceeded to ask me to apologize for what Boko Haram are doing to girls in Africa.
Because the Sikh community are responsible for that?
I mean, where do you start with that?
Where do you start with that?
Where do you start with that?
Was he absolutely off his head? Was he really drunk?
He was drunk, but, there were people around. No one piped up. No one said, all right, mate, calm down. I was on my own. It's very difficult to then decide that I'm going to be brave and say, fuck you, and put myself in a situation where there might be a crowd of people like that. So it's really complicated for me. But to answer your question, what moved me to write what I wrote was the conversation we had last week with Liam Byrne, because I thought he was thoughtful and incredibly considered and absolutely moving from the right place and absolutely saying the right things. And yet it didn't seem to occur once to him that he was talking to someone who is an immigrant in this country and the target of that stuff. Even from his brilliant, progressive, evidence-based standpoint, all he was analyzing, the only focus of what he was saying was the people that decide to vote reform, what moves them. And I just
How do we make reform voters feel better so that they don't vote reform, not how do their ideologies make
we don't even
very,
feature,
very innocent people feel?
We don't even feature in the conversation at the moment, Naomi. There are millions of people like me in this country, law-abiding, who pay a lot of fucking taxes and do a lot of hard work.
And volunteering and community work. And
we don't feature in the conversation at all, even when that aspect of it is explored in the most superficial and minimal way. It's about how British Muslims might be feeling. It's always about British citizens. The circle of concern that a government and a governing party ought to have for all the people in this country, whether they are a citizen, whether they are a resident, whether they are a guest, whether they are a student here. You are the custodian of everyone's safety. And we just do not feature in that conversation in the slightest at the moment. And I find it just utterly soul-destroying that, if someone as enlightened as that does not even tweak to say, and that must make you feel terrible.
Well, going back to his by-election victory, which, if memory serves me right, was 2004. It was the Birmingham Hodge Hill by-election. He was the candidate. And it was Tom Watson who was in charge of running that campaign. And the Lib Dems were doing their usual by-election, throw everything at it. If we're lucky, we might win. At a time when, under Charles Kennedy, they were doing really well and on the cusp of the 2005 general election, where they won 62 seats, I think, which for them was a huge leap forward. And Tom Watson authorised putting out a leaflet in that by-election campaign to elect Liam Byrne that said, "Labour's on your side. Lib Dems are on the side of failed asylum seekers." I was, really horrified by that campaign at the time, and I hated it. Obviously, Labour were being punished over the Iraq War. There were a lot of people very angry with them at that sort of latter stage Blair premiership. And look, I think Liam is great, and this is not me,
No, me neither. Me neither. Please, I don't want you to take it like that. I think he's head and shoulders above, the work anyone else is doing.
Immeasurably brighter, more informed, better educated, more sympathetic than many, many, many of his colleagues. But I found that campaign very disappointing, and I hope that maybe things would have improved in terms of sentiment towards those that have chosen to make the UK their home. So our call to action is to please go and read Alex's incredibly heartfelt Substack article. It's easily the most horrifying yet dignified thing I've read on Substack since I've been on that platform. And I commend it all to you, and the link will be in the show notes.
Yeah, and yet it's not. I am fully aware that I experience 2% of what a woman in a burqa might,
of course,
or someone that is actually from an ethnic minority.
Quiet riot.
And now, because we really do need a little bit of lightness to brighten an otherwise a thoroughly miserable week, both in weather and politics terms, it's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi? Please cheer me up.
Well, in a fash-heavy week, I've unearthed a good news story about Nazi gold. Well, actually stolen by the Nazis, priceless artwork, in fact.
Right.
So a painting looted by the Nazis during World War II has finally been recovered after its rediscovery in a most unlikely place, hanging on the wall in a real estate listing in, of course, Argentina. So the lost painting is called Portrait of a Lady by Italian artist Vittore Ghirlandaio, and it was traced after a Dutch news outlet spotted it basically in like a Rightmove listing and alerted the relevant real estate agency, who then got in touch with the police. And investigators learned that the painting originated from a Nazi official, Friedrich Cadogan, who in 1944 allegedly acquired it, aka stole it, along with many other artworks, under duress of its Jewish owners. And after the war, he fled, eventually settling in Argentina, like many Nazis did. And the work was listed as stolen and lost, but efforts in Europe completely failed to locate it and trace it. So following the tip-off, the Argentine police carried out raids across a lot of properties, including one owned by this guy's descendants. And though the painting was not then physically present in the first house they entered, they did find markings on the wall and hooks where it had been, and other evidence to confirm that it had been hung there. And other artwork, potentially they think from the 18th century, were seized. And the daughter and son-in-law of Cadogan were placed under house arrest for failing to turn over the painting earlier. And for the family of Jacques Goudsticker, a Dutch Jewish art dealer whose collection was seized by the Nazis, this recovery is, of course, a massive moment of relief for them. And his daughter, I think her name's Mare von Seyer, had been working for decades to try and track down 1,200 pieces of work that had been stolen from her family. And while Portrait of a Lady, I think, is just one small piece in a vast puzzle, its return should act as a reminder to us that even when Nazis and their modern-day wannabe cousins try to hang on to stolen treasures, the truth has a funny way of showing up eventually. Sometimes right there on Rightmove.
Surely far right move.
You're on fire today, Alex.
I can only apologize. Thank you, Naomi. Listeners, as ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it.
Quiet Riot.
And that's the end of the show. A huge thank you to Nick for joining us from his quiet corner in a hotel lobby and making his quiet riot, his not so quiet riot, David. Thank you, Nick.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank
Lovely.
you. It's been wonderful.
And listeners, remember that you can find Nick's book in our bookshop. We'll leave a link in the show note. He gets some cash, we get some cash, and your local bookshop gets some cash too.
And remember that our next editorial meeting is on Thursday, the 25th of September at 6:30 p.m. So sign up at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod if you'd like an invite to that. And we are very excited about it and hope to see you there.
Our editorial meetings are great fun, but more importantly, they're incredibly useful to us, your faithful podcasting servants, so that we can create the content that you want, from the regular features to the guests we book and topics we cover.
We'll be back on Sunday, but until then, keep on rioting quietly.
Lots and lots of love from us to you. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot.